hear.
Mr Assistant President.
General Mallard.
Local government speech.
It is indeed. Taylor stole it.
Don't mention the green band.
Mr Assistant President, it is a great humility and honour that I rise today to pay tribute to the life of Sir Nicholas Michael Shehadie, AC OBE, who passed away last Sunday, the 11th of February 2018, at the grand age of 92. Firstly, allow me to convey my deep condolences to his lifelong partner, Dame Marie Bashir, and the extended Shehadie family. Dame Marie is a much-loved public figure as our former governor, and I know the people of New South Wales are carrying her in their thoughts at this sad time.
Hear, hear.
Sir Nicholas Shehadie was a giant of a man, both literally and figuratively. In fact, it is said that the doctor told his mother, Hannah Shehadie, upon the birth of the 12-pound Nicholas on the 15th of November 1926, that she had given birth to a baby elephant. And Sir Nicholas quite enjoyed telling that story throughout his life. This big baby went on to become a bigger figure in the public life of this city and this nation through both sport and civic duty. And Mr Assistant President, my contribution to this condolence motion today will focus on his civic life, as I have no doubt, and as we've now heard, the rugby tragics in this chamber, there will be plenty said about his unrivalled sporting prowess. Of course, Sir Nicholas was a Redfern boy. He was actually born at a Coogee hospital, but his mother had been raced there by the local Redfern butcher from the family's Redfern Street terrace. The house where his grandfather and his father had settled the family from Lebanon in the early and mid-1920s. His Redfern roots were a point of great pride for Sir Nicholas throughout his life. There can be much said of the struggles he had as a migrant kid in the tough working-class suburbs of Redfern. But like most Redfern locals, he wore the community spirit as a badge of honour throughout his life, and he and Marie Bashir often returned to the area. Sir Nicholas's grandfather and his father were both well-educated men of religion and ministers in the Antioch Orthodox Church, and in fact built a church in Redfern, serving the largely local Lebanese migrant community. If you read Sir Nicholas' autobiography, A Life Worth Living, aside from being struck by his humility and the humour that permeates his life's journey, you learn of his humble beginnings in Redfern, his family's struggle throughout the Depression, the strength and the cohesion of the Redfern community. His typically Redfern rebellious boyhood upbringing, attending Cleveland Street and Crown Street's public schools, and his intersect or crossover with local Labor party identities like the local MP Bill McKell, and of course his love for the mighty Rabbitohs. Here's a glimpse in his own words of his childhood in Redfern, and I'm quoting from the excellent oral history project about Redfern by the City of Sydney, commissioned in 1994. And talking about Redfern, Sir Nicholas said, the interviewer asked him, what kind of house did you live in? And he said, in Buckingham Street it was a terrace house which still stands, and my brother was born in 88 Buckingham Street, Redfern. But the house on the corner of Walker and Redfern Streets, which is now Housing Commission, was a lovely old home. This was their first home. It was a big home, and the church was behind it. The church was built by his grandfather and father, and I have some very fond memories there, and the Albert View Hotel was right opposite. And we had a beautiful wall where all the boys, we used to sit there on a Saturday afternoon waiting for a fight to start in the pub, and we were never disappointed. Some very good street fighters in Redfern in those days. The interviewer asked, that was quite a common thing to watch the fights at the pub around closing time, wasn't it, back then? And he says, yes, but they were all good people at the same time. They'd all help each other. By Monday morning, they were all good friends again. And he goes on to say in the oral interview, I'm very, very proud of Redfern. I'm a Redfern boy, and I'm very, very proud of it all my life. And the larrikin joker comes through in his life story is ever present, and it's in this oral history when he's asked about what the local boys did for fun. And I thought it's quite enlightening to hear that. He says, we had the radio, it was always great for us. We had no television, and we go to the pictures and we go to the beach. I was a great one for scaling the trams. I could even jump off backwards, and we all learnt those things. Different world back then, wasn't it? The interviewer says, and you just hitched a ride? He said, oh yes, we didn't pay. And what beach did you go to? Down to Coogee, or we'd go and swim at Centennial Park. And I recall we'd be swimming there in the lakes, and when the trams went by, we'd all jump out in the nude to scare the tram passengers. Quite a larrikin. In fact, I wonder if it wasn't for the eviction of his family from their much-loved Redfern home by the Housing Commission, which demolished it to build the flats that are there today, an event he describes in the oral history as his saddest childhood memory, and the subsequent move to the Randwick area where he fell in with a rugby crowd. It may well be the other side of this chamber lamenting the passing one of their party. But something Sir Nicholas was proud of, and something many of us in this chamber also hold as important, was his personal respect for some of those on the other side of the chamber and his lifelong friendships with them. Mr President, my interest in Sir Nicholas' civic life stems from my own love of local government as a former South Sydney councillor and later in the City of Sydney. At least a generation, maybe two apart, I was always interested in his service to the community and conscious of the shadow he cast over both South Sydney and Sydney's Town Hall as an alderman, Lord Mayor and later a commissioner. So how did a great Australian rugby player and small businessman end up on the Conservative civic reform ticket for Sydney Town Hall? And again, I'll go to the autobiography and quote his own words on that. He says, I can honestly say that a career in politics never ever entered my mind until the Civic Reform Association, a non-aligned ratepayers association, contacted me and suggested I stand as an alderman for the council elections for the City of Sydney. They were looking for candidates and I was in no doubt that they wanted to capitalise on my sporting experience and profile, and the Shehadies were well known in the Redfern area. He was easily elected to the Northcote ward of the City of Sydney Council in the 1962 election, but civic reform with a minority on the council and up against the formidable Labor men like Cliff Noble, Reg Murphy and Ernie O'Day, amongst many others. He described his first term on council as, quote, a traumatic learning experience at the hands of the Labor Party. He soldiered on with civic reform in opposition, learning the ropes as a new alderman. When the election of the Liberal Askin government would, of course, continue the seesawing of political motivated council sackings and boundary redrawing. And if members,
What's changed?
indeed, what's changed? And if members would like to learn more about the 5 different times the City of Sydney has been sacked and redrawn, I recommend the excellent book Sacked by Hilary Golder.
Let's go for 6.
Compulsory reading for any City of Sydney councillor and any local government minister, but I do digress. So in 1967, the city councillors were all dismissed, and overnight, they were dismissed overnight, and the commissioners set about redrawing the boundaries. And Mr President, it's something I'm quite familiar with too, having been sacked in 2003 and re-elected in 2004 for the same reasons. And so the first South Sydney Municipal Council, comprising pretty much all of Alderman Shehadie's former Northcote ward, was created. Revealing the astute politician he actually was, Sir Nicholas jumped across to the new City Council, that's something I actually did too, and was elected on the Civic Reform team in 1969. Askin's political ploy paid off, and Civic Reform took control of Town Hall at the elections from Labor, something future state governments have failed to do since then. Once in power at Town Hall, Sir Nicholas's public policy legacy was to be established. Under Civic Reform and his active participation and leadership, especially on the land and development front, the first ever city plan was created with Sir Nicholas at the helm of the committee that created it. From that plan was created Martin Place, and I note against the wishes of the Askin government. Building setbacks and the widening of Wynne Street occurred, and the innovative heritage floor space ratio market, which allowed owners of heritage-listed buildings to sell on a council-regulated market the floor space above their heritage building to another development site, and the proceeds of that sale were then used to restore the heritage buildings under a strict council-approved plan. He was very proud of that innovation and talks about it quite a lot. This innovative approach is still used today by the council and copied in many parts of the world, and has saved many historic buildings in our city from economic deterioration and inevitable demolition. Members, if it were not for one single vote, one single pre-selection vote, Sir Nicholas may well have been the Liberal member for federal seat of Parramatta, and an ambitious young Liberal called Philip Ruddock might have had his career plans slightly stalled. But that was not to be. He lost that pre-selection by one vote against Philip Ruddock.
And Hornsby would have a different mayor.
But I said stalled, not delayed. No. But I don't think it would have been derailed. But 24 hours after losing that pre-selection for Parramatta, which was held at the Wentworth Hotel, Sir Nicholas was to be endorsed by Civic Reform and elected as Lord Mayor of Sydney. So it wasn't a bad consolation prize 24 hours later. In 1973, he became Lord Mayor of Sydney, and of course by his side, as always, Marie became Lady Mayoress, with all the civic duties of that era that went with that role, honorary position, and for which she exceeded, unsurprisingly. And of course, in those days, the office came with a chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce, with the City of Sydney flag fluttering on the bonnet, which by his own accounts, the boy from Redfern didn't seem to mind too much at all. Highlights in his term as Lord Mayor were the royal visit and the opening of the Sydney Opera House, great civic events that he and the city rose to. But he's also credited with establishing the Festival of Sydney in 1975, which is another great legacy of his civic life, still breathing artistic and cultural life into our city today. He's also credited for playing a leading role in the tripartite agreement between the City of Sydney, the New South Wales and the federal government that saved the community of Woolloomooloo from annihilation and inappropriate overdevelopment. In September 1977, after having increased the majority of civic reform at the council elections, Sir Nicholas quietly retired from local government, and he thought that was the end of the chapter. Sir Nicholas' career then moved into the sphere of boards and business, and in his own words he thought local government was behind him. And then, again in his own words, excuse me while I read the quote, on my retirement, this is from the council, I devoted myself to my business and was invited to join several company boards. My learning curve continued. However, one evening in 1987, almost 10 years later, Pat Hills, the former state member and my chairman on the Sydney Cricket Ground Trust, rang me to say the government was about to dismiss the City of Sydney and wanted me to become the new Deputy Chief Commissioner. My first reaction was, no way, I've been there, done that. In any case, that occurred the next morning. And of course, amongst the councillors that were sacked then by the Unsworth government were Clover Moore and Frank Sartor, but again I digress. He went on to efficiently, he's credited with very efficiently managing the City of Sydney, which was in financial stress at the time, alongside the two other commissioners as the newly elected Greiner government carved out the second South Sydney City Council. And given his love of South Sydney, he led the efforts to make sure, the successful efforts to make sure the new South Sydney Council was financially viable and had the quality staff. Something I came to appreciate very much when I was elected to South Sydney Council. And I just as an aside note that former Labor Mayor of South Sydney, Vic Smith, contacted me to sing highly the praises of Sir Nicholas in regards to the council that he took over at that time, because he certainly engineered a strong financial council out of that separation. Mr President, I hope that this has given a taste of Nicholas Shehadie's contribution to local government. It was clearly something he loved doing, and again in his own words, he says, talking about local government, as I look back on my days in local government, it was indeed an interesting period, and I appreciate the wonderful experiences it gave me. Local government is the government that's closest to the people because it deals with everyday issues. Sydney is a great city. I feel privileged to have been born and raised here, and I'm proud that I've been involved in its development. And I'm going to conclude now with a quote from another rugby tragic, Alan Jones. And Alan Jones writes in the foreword to this autobiography, Sir Nicholas' story proves yet again that success is, more often than not, born of adversity, that there is no royal road to achievement or public prominence, that what people do with their lives is sometimes more noteworthy for the simplicity of its progress rather than the dimensions of its achievements. I say thank you to Sir Nicholas. It is indeed a life well worth living. I commend the motion to the House.